So welcome everyone. Welcome to this event where we are looking at where we are reviewing the Brent Black Music History project with Kwaku. So how we'll proceed is, I will let Kwaku introduce himself and then introduce the project, and then we proceed from there. Kwaku.
Well, thank you for those that have joined us. We really do appreciate it. My name is Kwaku, and obviously thanks to Ambrose for having an interest in this project that he decided to create a Zoom event around it. That's cool. I must say that probably this date is interesting because I've just come from the unveiling of a plaque to one of the people that's highlighted in the project, actually. So it's an unveiling to a plaque of a guy called Sonny Roberts. Probably I'm not going to say much because then you discover it. So the way we're going around is that we did this project called Brent Black Music History, and it was Heritage Lottery funded project through my community organization called BTWSC. So this is over 10 years ago. Although I do a lot of history, I don't tend to remember the years of my own events. So I'll just say over 10 years ago. And we ended up with a double DVD and a booklet. Sadly, it was a free resource, so it's all gone. In fact, I think there's just one copy in the Brent archives at the moment. So at some time, I'll give you a choice of the menus, and I think Ambrose, it would be good for the people that have made an effort to be in the room to choose what they want to look at. But there is a short version, which is 30 minutes. So if you're so minded to watch the 30 minutes, then we can just play that throughout. But if not, we've got chapters on the topics covered, whether it's a building, community stations, or what others call pirate stations, labels, blah, 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 or interviews with people like Sonny Roberts, who I mentioned a moment ago. So it's really your call. Thank you very much.
So maybe before we go into watching segments from the DVD, maybe you could say a little bit more about the project itself. How did it start, and why Brent?
Right. It's a real shame that my wife isn't here. Hopefully, unfortunately, she's doing caring duty. So probably that's keeping her from joining. But it's partly as a result of my wife, because I always, when we're in town, I live in Brent. Brent, by the way, because I don't take it that everybody's from London, Brent is a northwest London borough next to Harrow, Ealing, Camden. And well, the landmark in where I live is the Wembley Stadium. So everybody, even if not a football fan, you would have heard of Wembley Stadium. So Wembley Stadium is in Brent. So as we go around, I'll tell her, oh, this building used to be this, or maybe there used to be a record company here, or a record shop in here, or blah, 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 blah. And she say, no, Kwaku, you always tell me about these things. Why don't you just do a project, right? So she really runs BTWSC, and if people are going to ask what does this stand for, normally she does that, but I'll give you the opportunity. It stands for Beyond the Will Smith Challenge. What happened was that she got a Millennium Award funding to do a project, and the project was called Beyond the Will Smith Challenge, where she encouraged young people to come up with music, poems, or articles that were positive, devoid of swear language, because this was a time when the gangster rap was on the ascent. There was a lot of negativity and swearing, and she doesn't abide by swearing and stuff. So after the project, the funding ended, we decided to keep the name as a project or an organization. So yeah, so that's how come we ended up with an organization. In fact, she's joined the call. We ended up with an organization called BTWSC, and she was lucky to get a Heritage Lottery Fund to do this project called Brent Black Music History. The idea being that, okay, Kwaku, let's capture as much of what you've been telling me all these years. So for those that were alive, we're able to interview them. But we're looking at 1962 to I forgot, it may be 2012 or 2002, I can't remember. But quite a long span from the 60s. So obviously I was able to interview those that were alive, but some obviously had passed on. So that's basically capturing, as I said in the introduction, a microcosm of Black history in Europe, actually, or in the UK, because Brent, I think, is a microcosm of the Black music industry in the UK. Whether you're talking about labels, you're talking about stations, you're talking about artists, a lot of them have some connection with Brent.
And starting with the artists that you interviewed, who are some of the people?
Oh my goodness, I should have been prepared and got a book because who's going to remember? Oh my goodness. Certainly I did I did Sonny Roberts, who was a pioneer. He was we believe, and I have to be mindful, when we say first, sometimes the history isn't robust enough and we'd say the first person. So I'll rather say he was one of the first Africans to own a recording studio in the UK. I think I need to interrogate the information a bit more. He said 1962. Today, on the plaque unveiling, they've got 1961. They may be correct, but I have to check that information. So nevertheless, he started a record label and a recording studio in Brent, Kilburn in Brent, in the early 60s. So that's Sonny Roberts. Daddy Ernie is still going. Oh, sadly, Sonny Roberts passed away about 3 years ago. Daddy Ernie is still going. At the time I interviewed him, he had a 5-day-a-week radio reggae show. And that was the only 5-day-a-week radio show in the UK. He was on Choice FM. So I think it's on one of the community radio stations at the moment. So Daddy Ernie has been around the reggae scene for a while. So he was one. Honestly, since I did this thing well over 10 years ago, how am I to remember the people I interviewed? Well, I interviewed a guy called Ray Williams, which most of you may not have heard of. But his record shop, Vasco, in Church Road, in between Neasden and Housden, was where I first got engaged in the music industry. I used to go into the record shop, and I ended up sorting out his publishing. And also, so that's how I really got into the music business. So he had a record called Growing Old. Certainly, I'm from Ghana, and people used to tell me that they used to play it on the national radio station so often. So a lot of people know of Growing Old. And a few years ago, Idris Elba did a documentary. I think it was a documentary on his father, I think, because they licensed this track called Growing Old for that documentary. So that would be Ray Williams, who had the label, who was an artist, a producer. Oh gosh, I interviewed two sisters, twins. Sadly, one of them died. They used to be in a group called Dazzle. Although they were from Jamaica, I do believe they were more into dance R&B. So it was important to realize that when we're talking about Black music and not necessarily reggae, although obviously reggae is quite prevalent in that story, the artist did a lot of things. Oh, I interviewed Phil Fearon. So if you're into the charts, then you have heard of Phil Fearon. Certainly, he had a lot of hits at Phil Fearon and then Phil Fearon and Galaxy. So his label also had a #1 with, I forgot, it was a rave tune and it's been in the charts over the years. So to have a small record label that was operating from a residential area in Kensal Green, the Kensal Green area, to go all the way to #1, I bet with the help of a major record company that picked up that track. It's gone out of my head, but it's one of the big dance rave tunes. So Robo Ranks is still on a reggae DJ. He used to be on One Extra at the time he was interviewed. Certainly, we interviewed Lindsay Wesker. Lindsay Wesker used to be one of the writers, and I dare say probably an editor or assistant editor on the newspaper called Black Echoes magazine. He's still DJing. He's written a book or two, or a couple of them, or at least one of them being on the music industry. I think he wrote a book on the rise of the DJ or something. I've got a big book, but I've forgotten what the title is. So Lindsay Wesker, he's a European. At the time I interviewed him, I interviewed him at MTV. He probably still works at MTV. He's the guy that created MTV Base. So that's a format that was promoting quote unquote urban music. I would say black music, but some people use the term urban music. So that was him. Probably I have to go to the chapters, and that will bring up those that have been interviewed. So if you make me a co-host, then I'll be able to use the share screen.
Yeah.
But I thank you for those that are here. I'm sure a lot more people book, but with these things, those that are here are those that are here. And as I said, I prefer those that are here to decide what we want to watch. But please, this was a chat with you, so please go ahead. I'm sure you've got a few more questions to ask.
Yeah, and then my other question is, you've mentioned how the idea for the Brent Black Music History project, the book and the DVD, how the idea came about, because you were talking about Brent and you were recalling, all these music-related buildings and the activities that used to take place in them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my question would be, from that sense that moving across Brent, what sense do you get about Black music in Brent?
Okay, I think I have to put this out there that my focus is very historical. So I'm not going to talk about current things because I am out of the loop. And indeed, I've been working with a chap called Sparky Ragged, a youngish chap who is born and raised in Houston and who's is very much on the streets, so to say, to look at maybe updating my results. So my results probably ends in the mid 2000s. So that's the area I can speak to because that's the area that I knew. So the new ones will be something that probably will be part two. So unfortunately, I can only speak to in historical terms. In historical terms, where I've just come from, which was the area around 108 Cambridge Road in Kilburn, is very pivotal to the development of Black music, not reggae, but Black music in Britain. So if I can give you the backstory, a chap came from Jamaica called Sonny Roberts, who was a carpenter. And as part of his carpentry work, he ended up meeting a guy called Chris. Oh, okay. So he had a sound system. What was it called? Is it Lavender or something like that? I had Lavender, I think it might be Lavender. So sound systems are very much, obviously we've done reggae, so you know about sound systems. So though he was one of the early, people always say Count Duke or Duke Finn. Sorry, Duke Finn was the first to create a sound system. He may well have, but Sonny Roberts is one of the early ones as well. So he had a sound system, and certainly during the weekends, he made a lot of money because he would talk about all these nurses and people wanting some entertainment. So whether it was a blues party in someone's house or in some community center, he will go and play. But his trade was a carpenter. So through that trade, oh no, again, I'm jumping, sorry, Ambrose. So he had a love for music. So I've talked about him being a sound system operator. And then he also, because of his love of music, wanted to have a studio. So he created one of the first African-owned studios at 108 Cambridge Road. Then he started this record label called Planetone. But what I've been trying to jump to is this. As a result of him being a carpenter, he ended up working for a guy called Chris Blackwell. Chris Blackwell is a European and Englishman, but he spent a lot of time in Jamaica. So he was one of the early Jamaican producers, record label owners. And when Jamaica became quote unquote independent, when they became independent in 1962, I do believe, he moved to the UK. And he was operating from his flat. And I think Sonny must have gone to his flat to do some work, and they were chatting, and he indicated that he really needs to move out to get some premises. And Sonny recommended where he was because there was some space at 108 Cambridge Road in Kilburn. So as a consequence of Sonny introduction of Chris Blackwell to the owner of the building, a guy called Lee Guptill, Island Records moved to 108 Cambridge Road. Now, Lee Guptill is a Jamaican of Indian heritage. So I've talked about a Jamaican of African heritage, to some extent, a Jamaican of European heritage, and now into the mix is a Jamaican of Indian heritage. I made the point because often people think that Caribbean is synonymous with people of African heritage, which is not. If you look at their coat of arms and their slogan, it says, out of many, one people or something. There are a lot of heritages in Jamaica. Anyway, back to the story. As a consequence of Sonny Roberts' introduction, Lee rented space to Chris Blackwell. So the early island staff, you see the address as 108 Cambridge Road. But Lee also, who was an accountant, saw what was going on and ended up in the music business. He started something called B&C, and then he also linked up with Chris Blackwell to relaunch Trojan Records. Most people, if you're into reggae, would have heard of Trojan Records. Chris actually launched Trojan Records initially in 1967, but it wasn't as successful, so most people don't know, and they think it started in 1968. But as a consequence of him wanting to do some more reggae, because he was starting to shift into R&B, into rock, so he and others, including what's his name, Lee Guptill, relaunched Trojan Records in 1968. So I think the story that I'm telling about Brent, it's crystallized in 108, where I just come from, or the site. I don't think the exact place, but it's around where 108 Cambridge Road used to be. So I'll just say that Brent had a lot of things going in terms of Black music, the industry. Palmer Records, which was one of the big reggae labels, was based in Brent. A lot of people know them as Trojan Records, as Jetstar Records, because later they changed their name to Jetstar Records. Trojan, Island, and indeed, I must say, Sonny Roberts' label, Orbiton, is quite important because I just said at the unveiling that although he was Jamaican, he did not focus on reggae. The Inkangas was a West African group he produced. Peter King was doing sort of Afri jazz. He had big people's music, Tim Chandel. He was able to get Judy Boucher into the national charts, who went as far as #2. And that had been the 80s, when we didn't have internet, no social media. If you didn't have Radio 1 support, it was very, very difficult to make it. Somehow he managed to get, and he wasn't distributed by a major company either, but he got to #1, not in the reggae charts, but in the national pop charts. Judy Boucher, Can't Be With You Tonight, I do believe it is called. So I'm saying Brent has a lot to claim its primacy within the history of Black music in Britain. Sibisa, the members came from Brent. If you look at High Tension, which was a big Brit fan group, they came from Brent. Oh, I could go on and on. I'm going to make sure that I give the link to, I've not put the Brent Black Music History resources online. And sadly, the physical resource, which is the DVD and the booklets, they're out of print. But Brent was the London Borough of Culture for 2020. And as a consequence, they updated the information from the document and produced something called, I do believe, A to Z of Brent Black music. And Metroland has put it online. So I will try and get the link so that those on this call can get that link. And it gives you an idea of some of the claim to fame of Brent.
Mm. And you also mentioned or stressed that Black music is not exclusively reggae. How do you define or understand Black music in Britain?
Very interesting, very interesting. I'm laughing only because an organization, I think they call Self-Help News. They do circulate things on the Pan-African, or as I prefer, Global African radar. And they interviewed me, I think 2006. And the 2 days ago, they wanted to update it. So they interviewed me and they asked similar questions. So my answer then, and which is now, is that Black music is any musical expression that comes from the African experience, which comes from the African experience. But it does not mean that it's only created by Africans. Because let me give you an example, jazz is an African music, Black music, but who commercially, who is the face? Or even, I won't say perverse, but even strikingly blues, which comes from the pain of African Americans. But that genre, the face of it is not Africans today, it's Europeans. So Black music, and they will acknowledge that it's an African genre, but commercially they are reaping the success. So in a nutshell, the answer to your question is that Black music is any musical experience that comes from the African experience, or any musical expression that comes from the African experience.
So in your view, why this is a question that is coming from looking at the history of Black music and also Black artists, and looking at how they fare. So do you see the same things happening with Black music in Britain today as what used to happen, let's say, in the US, where a lot of the people who actually managed to make a living out of their music were not African or African American or African descent, but were European?
Right. My wife and I edited a book called African Voices, Quotations by People of African Descent. The reason being that often when we having quotations, we tend to default to Europeans, whether it's Winston Churchill or whatever, depending on your education. But Africans, whether on the continent, in the UK, or globally, have also said words that are worth repeating. So I put something in. And the interesting thing is that I'm terrible, that's why I write. And indeed, sometimes when I write an article, I've got to reread it because I've forgotten what I've written. So I'm that type of person. So I'm going to try and quote something that I said, but I'll probably murder it a bit in the sense that it won't be exactly what's in the booklet. I said something to the effect that in the end, everything is commodified. Che Guevara was a revolutionary. But today, Che Guevara is used for commercial purposes and selling things like vodka. So where people can make money, they'll go into it, whether they love it or not. I dare say there may be some racists, or I'm not using racist, I'll be more specific. There may be people who are Afrophobic. Afrophobic means that they've got hatred of Africans, but it does not stop them commodifying Black music or Black culture if it puts food on their table. So that being so, majority of people in the West are Europeans. Majority of people with the spending power are Europeans. So if there's any culture that is popular, it stands to reason that majority of those consuming will be Europeans. And people like to see themselves. So as much as we talk about authenticity, and people will say yes, and there are Europeans who don't like the Europeans who produce African, and I've met them. I've met some Europeans who do not think that Europeans who do African culture, but let's focus on music now, it's authentic. So they'll go to the serious reggae or jazz and leave the European artists. But the mainstream consumes what the mainstream media gives to it. The mainstream media is about numbers. So obviously, if an African is selling numbers, he will have, what should I say, a window for publicity. Equally, if Europeans are shifting numbers, Amy Winehouse or whoever, they will be the face of it. So what I'm trying to say is that it's about buying power. And if most people are buying the Europeans, then they are going to be the face of it. I find it slightly perverse, and I'm using perverse in quotes, that yes, you cannot control culture. Sometimes I go on our platforms and look, yeah, let's lock it down, let's control it, and say, you can't control culture. You can't control culture. But if I'm looking at something, the blues, that speaks to the pain of the African experience. And yes, I have nothing against Europeans doing blues. But if it's got to the stage where that genre is represented by Europeans, then we have to question. But as I said, the first thing I told you in answering this was that in the end, everything is commodified. So if it's the blues genre, that is commodified. So that's the answer to your question. It's a commodity. Commodity means buying and selling. And if people have got the power to sell to the masses, that is what it's about. So any music. I think you might have mentioned Afrobeats. Afrobeats was a genre that was underground. That mainstream was not aware of it. Many, many years before they heard about it. Now, it's commodified. But who is to stop the progress? Just last week, I found something interesting. I guess it's progress in a way. An advert of an English village. Nothing particularly attractive to Africans, or it's not a product focused on Africans. It's using Afrobeat, not beats, Afrobeat, fearless music to advertise an English village. So I guess it must be, we have to look at it in progress. I'm not going to stop that. I mean, but you know something, there's nothing stopping an African consuming the music if they want to. There's nothing stopping an Asian or European. Let me give you one fact. Hip hop as a commercial genre was because of Europeans. If hip hop was waiting for Africans to consume it, it may not have become the global genre that it is. And those in the business, Russell Simmons, all those people acknowledge, and especially the gangster rap that you remember the 90s and the early 2000s were big sellers. It was more Europeans consuming. But I guess there's something about the music being exotic that also attracts non-Africans to some of our cultural expressions. Yeah. So it's a long-winded answer, but hey, this is supposed to be a conversation, and you're not going to get a quick answer from Kwaku.
Yeah. And then maybe finally, what do you think would be the value of more people in towns and cities, even villages around the UK, doing projects similar to the Brent Black Music History project?
Are you talking about them doing something in the sense of curating or documenting Black music, or their local music?
I think both.
Okay, well, both. Let me start with music in general. At this unveiling, people are saying it's important for us to document our stuff. It is true. The problem is that people are always waiting for funding. Yes, this particular document was funded, but I've done tons and tons of stuff without funding. And I'm saying funding is great, but you shouldn't wait for funding to do things. You know what? I did a couple of projects without funding, and had I not done it, I would have missed the opportunity because some of them are gone. You can't bring them back to interview them. So I'll say, with or without funding, it's important to document things in your area, because when we're gone, the next generation will find out something in that area. Remember, our buildings are being knocked down. For example, I'm talking about 108 Cambridge Road. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a block of flats. But at least with the plaque being there, someone will say, oh, there used to be some Black music activity around here. So it is important. And I'll say in terms of Black music as well, it is important because often when we talk about British music, Black music is not always featured or given the prominence that it needs to. So sometimes, just like with Black, I don't tend to say Black history, I say African History Month, we need that space to focus. So I suggest that people focusing on Black music in their area will be great. And you talk about towns and villages, which is good, because sometimes we don't realize the history within that village. You think you see all European, so you think it's just a European village, but there could be a Black music history there. People like the Fixed Jubilee Singers went and sang in different parts of the UK. So there could be something. The UK, meaning Ireland as well, they went to Ireland. The Southern Syncopated Orchestra, they're all over the place. I'm talking about people at the turn of the last century. So some village might have some gem of a Black music history in there. Yeah, so please, all those on this call, I encourage you to dig. The first port of call may be your local archive. Your library or your local archive may have some stuff that is dusty because nobody has come to refer to it ever since it was put in the archive. So yes, I think it's a good question. I suggest people are proactive instead of waiting for others to do it. See what you can do. It need not be a big project. It need not be a big project. It could be enough for you to blog, for example. That is also valid. We're in the internet age or the digital age. So yeah, so that's a good question. Thank you.
Mm. And then thinking about funding itself, one of the actually people, Black people in the UK complain that it is actually very difficult to get funding. Do you think there are things that could be done to actually make this funding available, more easily accessible?
Okay, you're all right. But the point is that funding has always been difficult. If you know one of the big companies, organizations like the English, let me get English National Opera, the South Bank, where you really get some serious money from the Arts Council, and the Arts Council have got projects that are red line in the sense that they are funded continuously. I forgot the name they have for it. And then the rest of us, we've got to go for pots of funding now and then. So as I said, if you know one of those big organizations where their funding is assured, and I'm talking about those that get millions, those that get the millions, they are pretty much assured because it's seen as national heritage or treasure, then anyone else, except you've got some good contacts, anyone else is in the same boat, and that includes European organizations. So let me put that out there. But of course, as we know in this world, particularly, let's focus on Britain, Africans are always on the wrong end of those social indices, whether it's education, housing, funding, jobs, etc. So that naturally also applies to funding. I have to say that some fund this, and you have to remember that it's in the funder's interest to disperse the money. Their job is not to hold the money. They are actually mandated to give out that money. So some of them make an effort to be proactive in doing workshops and engaging with different communities to tell them about the funding. Certainly in Heritage Lottery, for example, they went out, and I went to one or two of their workshops, encouraging people to come and take a fund, because you know what? They're also reviewed, and they look at the demographics and say, oh, okay, let's say Africans constitute 30% of this area. Oh, we see you've only given 12%. No, it's not good enough. So they're also monitored. So it's in their interest to make sure that at least they're meeting those statistical indices that are available to us. But you asked me what can be done. What can be done is that if you're interested in funding, then be proactive. The online shows you so many opportunities for funding. in my area, for example, Brent, we've got something called the Harvest Trust, I think it's called, but they're in different areas. Please, nobody is going to put funding on your lap except if you've got good contacts. So I implore you not to complain, but be proactive in seeking where the funding is and go for it. But secondly, you have to look at what the funders are looking for and write your bid to satisfy those funders. Having said that, there's a lot of workshops that tell you how to respond to those bids because they know that sometimes it's too technical. We got 2 heritage lottery funding. It wasn't easy. And quite frankly, I haven't been bothering about funding because it takes too much time and energies. So we tend to do things within our own means, but I'm not against funding. So if you've got the opportunity to go for funding, particularly heritage lottery fund where you can get some big money, please do. But the last thing I'll say is this, you never get what is called, if not our last year, you can remind, what's it called? Something cost. You don't get full cost recovery. This, in the sense that even if you see people that are supposed to have 60,000, 100,000, don't be too impressed because that project is going to cost more than what is on the paper. So that's me down there.
Thank you, Kwaku. Thank you. And this is just a reminder. If you've got questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll come to them. And then maybe thinking about the DVD itself, I'm partial to interviews.
Okay.
I'm also partial to buildings.
Okay,
I think
I put DVD 2, so I suspect that has got some building. The interviews I noticed on a different DVD. So let me just go with what we have. And then we'll definitely go to the interview because obviously that's people talking to their experience. And I've never done this on a Zoom. So let's see how we're going to make this thing work on a Zoom. Yeah. So on here, we've got buildings, community centers, Courtney Pine, Ephemera, foundation builders, hit records, industry issues, power stations, record retailing, sound systems. So I'm now going to change the DVD because it's a 2 DVD thing. Then interviews on a different DVD.
So maybe when you put the DVD on the next DVD, if you just introduce the segment and then you let the person speak. Okay. And then we'll go back to questions. If anyone has got questions. Sure. If there are no questions, we wind up.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool.
Is a observation, maybe a question. Well, earlier when we were talking about the face of African music seems to be European, and you mentioned about jazz. Looking at, and you mentioned about the diversity of Black British music. The current generation, the face of the music seems to be African, whether it's Afrobeat, grime, etc. But in terms of the people who are making the profits, the producers, the labels, are they Africans or are they Europeans? You said you're not so au fait with the modern artists, but for instance, this lad from Church Road, he's had a hit album that Guardian recommended him for an award. He got an award. Nines, Crabs in a Barrel was a hit album. So he's the face of it. That's his music. But who are the producers? Who are the ones making the money? Because the face of the music seems to be African, but who else is involved?
Right. 10 years ago, no, more than 10 years ago, I met this African Caribbean chap who does PR in Brixton. And he was saying the Africans, by Africans, he meant continental, because I made a distinction. People from the Caribbean, a lot of them are of African heritage, so they're Africans. But he meant continental Africans are running things. And that was before Afrobeats had blown up mainstream. So what they were doing concerts where they were playing to packed audiences, but the mainstream had cotton onto that. So they were the promoters, the artists, and the money was going to the community. I believe that Afrobeats has crossed over, and a lot of the people involved are of African heritage. So obviously they're doing deals with majors because some of them are signed to Sony, Warner, or whatever. But basically the production houses and the labels, because a lot of the labels are from Nigeria, for example. So those are owned by the Nigerians. So the Africans or continental Africans are making something out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Which, and I'll just give you an example as well. Many years ago, so I think that would have been the 80s, there was a big Asian scene. Those were the days of cassettes, before CDs, cassettes. And they were selling a lot. AMG went and hooked up with the big Bangra label. And the idea was to bring in mainstream because they could see that we were selling a lot of stuff. But I don't think, obviously, he ended up putting Bangra like the mainstream shops like HMV of the days. So wherever people think that there's money, they'll get involved. So I'm sure there are Europeans involved in Afrobeats as to speak, but I think the main face, both the artists and producers that far, are of African heritage. Right, so the choice is...
Kwaku, on that, there's also, you know, people like Stormzy who are doing really, really phenomenal work, and others who are, for example, in the grime scene, who are also doing really, really phenomenal work. Actually,
I think we've got to be mindful. Stormzy is transcending the grime. He is a pop artist right now. He's a big artist. It's like, today, in fact, today, I'm reading the Metro and they're showing, I think, either the birthdays or something to do today. And the two pictures, one of them is Stormzy. Stormzy is a mainstream artist. If you sell albums, if you can sell Glastonbury, you're not grime. You above grime, man. You mainstream. And that is what Stormzy is. Yeah, of course, it's great that he should come from the underground. Remember in 2015, we had this thing, Brits So White, where people are saying that there were hardly any Africans nominated in the Brits. And Stormzy had, I think, a mixtape, and that blew him up. And from there, he hasn't looked back, and he's been embraced both by the underground and the mainstream. It's not often that you get that. Usually when the mainstream sort of embraces you, the underground sort of shies away from you. I dare say there are people in the underground that think Stormzy is gone commercial, so they shied away from him. But the grime genre has produced a lot of commercial artists, which is good because remember, it is a business. That reminds me, July 29th, I think Saturday, we've got the music business course because we focus on music, but I have to understand the business. So I do a music business course every year as part of British Black Music Month. So there we go. Yeah, Skepta, all these people, right? So selling albums, selling shows, if you're in the music business, it's a business for you to put food on the table. There's no good being in the music business and it doesn't work enough for you. So you got to do your plumbing or wherever. So I applaud people who are commercially successful. It's not easy. It's not easy. So back to where we are. Ambrose, these are the choices.
Yeah.
On the first page. The introduction is me. Strike Lee, he died a few years ago. Top reggae, Jamaican reggae producer. Kamel Hines, British soul, British funk, bassist, producer, musician. Mr. Carl Palmer was one of the brothers that started Palmer Records that became Jetstar. We've got Carl Thompson, who's one of the Lovers Rock Queens. Daddy Annie, I mentioned earlier, is still one of the top reggae DJs. Dave VJ, I don't think he DJ. No, I think he DJs on My Soul. He used to be a Kiss FM DJ. Hip hop. These are the guys that really pushed hip hop in the UK. Darrell Washington, he passed during COVID 2020. One of the early British reggae artists, and of course, everybody's Brent. So I was just going to say Brent artist, but it stands to reason. Faye Simon, not a lot of people know her. She's sort of soul jazz. Gappy Ranks is a DJ, reggae DJ. That's what I mean. Hugh Francis was the artist, and then he
Okay.
started working for Jetstar Records. So I guess we'll be talking about the industry. Jenna Kay, you'd have heard of as one of the largest rock queens. So I'm going to go on the next page. This is a DVD, so it is a bit slow. Casey Jones, probably nobody's heard of him. Maybe Fitzroy may have heard of him. He had the sound, one of the last shops, bar, Starlight and Hawkeye. I think they were called Sounds too in housing. So he was interviewed as somebody who'd been in the area, but also having a record shop. Joseph Prophet, Prevost, they were one of the sound system guys, but they were playing R&B because people equate sound systems to reggae. It's not always reggae. The hip hop mastermind, for example, hip hop sound systems. Lindsay Wesker, I mentioned earlier on, a journalist, a TV executive. Melissa Sinclair used to run a magazine called Gargamel or something Mag. I've forgotten. Gargamel. It became whatever. MJ is a local rapper. Mickey D, he was part of so many community radio stations, but I mean, or pirate stations. Omar is a musician, a soul artist. He has a sort of link with Brent. Paul Dawkins, he's still around, 40 years, one of the top reggae, and he was in a band called Tradition, and then as a Lovers Rock solo singer. Paulette Patterson, I mentioned Dazzle. Paulette Patterson was one of the twins that were part of Dazzle. Again, this was not reggae, so it's important to know it's not just reggae. Phil Fearon, I mentioned earlier on because obviously he had pop success. Popsy is the owner of one of the two record shops still going in Housden. It's called Starlight. I think there may be one other page, so let's click on that and see what happens. Yeah, Raj Porter was one of the directors of a company called Champion. Champion were distributors, and a label, Dido, was a big seller in the 90s or early 2000s. Faithless was a big band that came from them. The first releases by Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff, that came through them. They did a lot of dance music. Ray Williams, I mentioned earlier on, he had his own Vasco Records shop and label. Robert Ranks, I mentioned, he used to be on One Extra. Roger St. Pierre used to be the PR for a record company called Beacon Records in Brent that did a lot of dance music. The guy was from the Caribbean. I've forgotten which country, certainly not Jamaica. And so he wasn't focused on reggae music. He did all types of black music. Ruth Jackson was actually signed to Beacon Records, and he came from Yorkshire and came down to London to further his career, and he was signed to Beacon Records as Ruth and Jenny. So if you're into history, you can look at Ruth and Jenny, and I think they even did some TV performances in the early 70s. Sam West, singer, vocal coach. Slim Datty was one of the rappers. I don't know what's become of him, but he was quite big on the scene at some time. Slim Datty, a rapper, so hip-hop. Son Roberts I've mentioned, so I'll move on. T.C. Curtis was a musician and producer. And interesting enough, he had the good luck of signing a group called Matai. Matai was a group from Holland or the continent. And they had some hits because Virgin picked up the label or the tracks by Matai. I forgot how to spell Matai, but and they had some hits. So obviously he saw some money. Teddy Osei is part of a group called Osei that is going in some form or the other right now. Tony Ravkat, the Ravkat band, they've backed a lot of Jamaican musicians, the producers. They had a studio in Brent. Tony is still going. I spoke to him yesterday. He's in Jamaica producing. Valerie Vibes, one of the few female musicians, Akabu, and a lot of female bands. You see Valerie Vibes there. Winston Francis is one of the top veteran reggae artists. So I know that's a lot, but if you choose whatever, we'll go for it. So what strikes you, Ambrose? Or if not, we can put it to the room.
Or maybe, you know, if you pick something that resonates with you, most. We
Okay.
start from there.
Right. Since I'm saying Sonny Roberts and we talked about Sonny Roberts, the plaque was unveiled today. Let's kick off with Sonny Roberts. I'm sorry we're doing audio because he got emotional.
I am Sonny Roberts. I'm a record producer. Started in Brent. 62. Opened up a little studio. I wasn't thinking of I could make myself any money from there. I go in there because I love music. Used to run a sound system. And I think, okay, I should make some record to play on my song. A lot of people earn off of me, get rich, and things like that. And it's very pleasing to see what I achieve from that. It makes me stronger to know that somebody can live off the things I do. The children can eat from it. But I didn't start to earn a lot from it at that time. But now, I think it's coming. Because I can feed it, I see, and I can see the honor. The honor. Where I reach now. To know some of the things I've done. You know, people can say, thanks. So, if it wasn't you, reach there.
You know something? This is Sonny Roberts. He's one of the pioneers of music, not just Black music, but music in the UK. I'm most honored that I've met him. He's blessed, he's now retired to Jamaica. A lot of his contemporaries didn't make it. He's come, he's done the business, and he can now relax back home. So I'm honored that on the rare occasion of him being in England, he's given us his time. Sonny, I know you've been emotional, but I tell you something, God's time is the best time, and I'm glad that I've caught up with you. You are humble, and I don't think you realize how much you've done for us, particularly those within the Black music sector. Without you, a few of the people that we know and we've heard of will not be there. Now I'm going to ask you a couple of direct questions. I hope you can remember, because I know you came here in the early 60s. So you started Planetone.
Yeah.
This was in Cambridge Road.
Yes.
108, you told me.
108.
And some people walked through the door who also helped push the industry. Tell me about some of these guys who came through your door and helped the Black music sector in the UK.
Well, it's quite a few. I would say the first one that walked through the door. And he said, I heard about you in Jamaica. And I would like to do things with you, we could work together. And it was Chris Blackwell. Yeah, I didn't know him, I know anything else. And he wasn't at Cambridge Road, he was somewhere else. But then he started having a bit of problem, I think, with, he was at Connaught Square, Nigeria, maybe with the next door neighbor, nice and things like that. So he had to move. And I saw him and said, Sonny, Persian man have a move. You know where I could find somewhere? I said, well, there's an empty shop upstairs. We don't have a rent for about 10 years or 15 years. If you want it, you can have it. I'll check it out. He said, check it out. And I check it out. And the guy said, yes. He was glad. Lee Gupta was glad. It was his premises. And Chris took it and come. And the little place, it was just a little front shop, like a room. That's where Island didn't start. They start somewhere else, but that's where I think it begins to start.
Was that the same upstairs 108?
I was downstairs.
He was upstairs.
And he was upstairs on top of me.
Okay.
But he was so nice, and you know, I was there sometime late in the night. He was there, and he used to go to Jamaica, bringing all the new tune from Jamaica. When he comes, he says, "Sonny, come listen to it upstairs." He was very excited. Go up to him, he said, "Listen up." Until he started giving me acetate to cut. You want to hear it, and I used to cut the acetate and things like that. He was the first, but Lee enter into this with, I don't know if he didn't know or understand.
Was it the landlord?
The landlord.
Lee was the landlord.
He used to come, and so I was a builder also. A lot of his shops, I do that. I think I do much about 4 or 5 at Lee Gupta's shop. Burnt Oak, Shepherd Bush, Ladbroke Grove, Wilson Green was I think Wilson, not Wilson. Yeah, Wilson Green was one. And then that Kilburn Lane was one. That's the first one. And that's where Lee start from that one. Okay. Then come B&C by Lee, there was a next company. Then come Georgian. Yeah.
Mrs. Sonny Roberts, in 2003,
Yeah.
my organization called the Black Music Congress, we set up something called BMC Recognition Ceremony.
Yeah.
And we honored some artists and people in the industry.
Yeah.
In terms of people in industry, we gave the BMC Foundation Builders Award to 4 people.
Yeah.
That included you. I gave it to Lee Gupto.
Yeah.
I gave it to Chris Blackwell,
Yes.
to Carl Palmer,
Yes. Yes.
and to you, Sonny Roberts, because you are the foundation builders. Without you, I don't think we'll have our Black music sector. So I officially want to give you this in. Thank you very much, Sonny. You have a close-up?
Come on.
You deserve it, you deserve it, you deserve it. Thank you very much, Sonny.
Okay, so that was it.
Right now, particularly tonight. It's not very often I can get to see you, but you was trying behind it.
Ambrose, so we've just seen that one. So yeah.
Thank you.
Technology
Thank you,
is
Bob.
quite good. So at least not sorry, I said scene. We've just heard that. So I hope you could hear it properly.
Yeah.
That's good.
So maybe to wind up. Okay, so I'll do the introduction that I didn't do at the beginning. We are listening to Kwaku. Kwaku is a historical musicologist. He's also the author of Brent Black Music History Project book and DVD, and he is convener of July 1 International Reggae Day, and June is British Black Music Month. Kwaku is a music industry consultant and an occasional journalist who delivers programs on British African history, reggae music, Black music, the music industry, politics, and community engagement. And he holds an LLM in entertainment law, media, and music industry MAs. Maybe you could also say something about July 1 International Reggae Day.
Right, thank you very much. International Reggae Day on July 1 has been going for many years, and you can do the calculation. Next year is going to be 30th anniversary.
Oh.
Yes, so we're expecting to do something big and befitting, and my wife is here, or she probably isn't, but I always have the caveat, God willing, because all we have is right now. We don't even have the next 5 minutes. But if God is willing for me to be around, we expect to do something very good that moves the bar. So in 2017, I organized the first International Reggae Day in the UK, the official one, because I got in touch with them in Jamaica. And I thought, you see, International Reggae Day is supposed to be done any town, any city, anywhere in the world. But I thought if I'm going to put effort into this, then I want to convene, to be the convener of it, the co-organizer in the UK. So at the moment, I'm the convener for any International Reggae Day official, because people sometimes do things on 1st July and call it International Reggae Day, but if it's not licensed by us, then it isn't official. So basically, it's about promoting reggae and Jamaican culture in any way people want to for 24 hours, which is 1st July. This year was great because 1st July fell on a Saturday. So we're able to have a whole day program, noon to 9 o'clock at Goldsmith University, University of London. Next year, which is the 2024, it's going to fall on a weekday. So we will do something in Brent, because we always do something in Brent. Indeed, this year we did something the night before, which was 30th July, because let me rewind. On International Reggae Day 2018, I do believe we planted a tree. So there's something in the house called the Reggae tree. Yeah. And we wanted to become a cultural icon in Brent. So this year we got the mayor, we got the leader of council, we got the assembly member in the London Assembly, and a lot of all the things, right? You're mute.
Sorry, yeah, I was trying.
Okay, so we got all these people to come down there, and we also wanted to make the point that although it's in an area which people are trying to call Windrush Square, we must be careful not to put Windrush on it. It's part of International Reggae Day's environmental remit. International Reggae Day has got a plant a tree remit. So the reggae tree is a symbol of that. We couldn't plant a lot of trees, but at least we've planted one tree, which is a symbol of our environmental remit. Having said that, I better plug my wife. My wife is part of Eco-Conscious Citizens, which is on a global African and UK and Ghanaian based environmental project. So it's Eco-Conscious Citizens. Right. So we always do something in the house in Brent, because we call house in Brent the capital of reggae in Britain. So this year we had a great thing at Goldsmith University. Sadly, because 2024 is a weekday, we'll be housing for the 1st July, but we're hoping to be in Goldsmith for a bigger all-day program on, I think it's July, whatever. So somebody can tell me the nearest Saturday to 1st July. So that's what we'll do in Goldsmiths. And then 1st July, we'll be in housing. So it's about celebrating reggae and Jamaican culture in whatever way people choose to. So that's the answer to the question.
Thank you. And June is British Black Music Month.
Yeah, fun enough. As I said, I do history and I tend to remember other things, but I don't tend to remember my own things. So last year, I thought we started in 2023 or something like that. So 2003. But 10 days later on that, let me rewind. British Black Music Month was started in 2006. Before then, I started something called BritishBlackMusic.com, a website, because I've been around the music industry for a long time. And that, remember, 2003, 2002, the dawn of the internet for most of us. So I thought, I want to transfer what I do on the offline world, that's the real world, onto the online world, because I do a lot of seminars. I was doing a lot of seminars, and a lot can be done online. So we ended up creating something called BritishBlackMusic.com, which was a website with information. And more importantly, I found out that online is great, but it's not as great as it could be. I remember this is 20 years before social media, right? So we started something, a physical event called Black Music Congress, where we held regular meetings at City University. City University is part of London University, or University of London, because I used to teach there on their music business courses. And we're very ambitious. I think we started off monthly meetings. So we'll have a debate, whatever debate, yeah. So that's what we're doing. And then I used to write for a magazine called Billboard. Some of you, if you're in the music business, you'd have heard of Billboard. Billboard is the music business trade magazine for the US, and it's quite global. So I had a column in there. I was the international hip hop editor, but I wrote about other things. For example, if I went to Ghana, I'm very much into copyright. So I'll look at what's happening in the copyright situation, because it took them a long time to implement the Copyright Act. It was a bill for a long time. So I'll update them on Billboard as to what was going on. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I noticed whilst reading Billboard that they've got Black Music Month, which was in June. So you know the Americans, they do Black music or sorry, Black history, and they think that's it. And Black history for them is just African American history. So I thought I'll qualify what I wanted to do, which is British Black Music Month. So we'll focus on British Black music. So please don't tell me about Jamaica or America or Ghana or whatever. But also, what did I want to say? So British Black Music Month. Yeah, so that was it. Oh yeah, also we quickly found out that June was not enough because the number of events that we're doing, it went into July. So officially, British Black Music Month is June, July. So it crosses over two months. And indeed, this is part of British Black Music Month. And we end officially on 31st July. But Ambrose, I think what I'm going to do, and I'm glad that the people that started with us are still here, ladies and gentlemen, on this meeting, I'm going to sort out this technology, and Ambrose and I are going to convene a date on which we'll have it, not working on the DVD, because I think, what are we on Zoom? It's not ready for this. You can't do it. I have to put on my computer so I can work from my computer, because I'm working for an external disk, and that's why we're having a problem. So I'm making this commitment that we will reconvene a meeting where it will be seamless as it ought to be. So yeah, that's British Black Music Month, which we still in. We are, all of you on this meeting, we celebrating British Black Music Month.
Mm. And then my own final question would be, what do you think the future is going to be like for Black music in Britain and also internationally?
Okay. I'll talk about Black music. Black music happens, it changes. Sometimes it goes underground, never to resurface, or sometimes people rediscover it. Let me give you an example. Ska music. We're talking about reggae. Ska is one of the precursors to reggae. That had its heyday in the 60s. But lo and behold, in the 70s, some Europeans, and I'll say some Africans, Coventry or whatever, discovered ska, and we had the two-tone revival. And that went as far as to America. And I met Michael Riley. Michael Riley is the guy that does Black music or something in Westminster University, where I used to teach as well. And today, I met him today. And he used to say that people thought ska was when there was, I think people say ska went through three phases. The first was the 1960s from Jamaica, the 1970s from the UK, and then the third was, I do believe, maybe the 90s. I get my decades confused, but these American groups were doing ska music. Can somebody give me some names? Mostly fronted by Europeans. But the point being that a lot of the younger generation thought ska came from them. Those that they've seen in the 90s. And there were some big bands in America, I've forgotten their names. So history is important, because if you don't have somebody like Michael Riley or myself saying that ska, no, it doesn't start with this, but it didn't start with the two-tone. Oh, no, actually, yeah, the people in America thought ska started the two-tone people, which was the 70s people. So bands like Madness, like who did Gangster? Who did Gangster? Oh, The Specials, Selector. So the Americans were thinking ska start because I think that's where they picked up on ska. But if you dig there, you find that ska came from Jamaica. But they didn't know that connection. So that's why it's important to have this type of forums and to document our history so that people don't have a false impression of that history. So yeah, if you ask me something, I've gone, look, Ambrose, when you ask Kwaku a question, he's going to go around the neighborhood. Yeah, so yeah, the reason why I mentioned ska, I was saying that sometimes they go underground and sometimes they resurface. So ska, it was a good example. Some of the musics don't resurface, but the important thing is that Black music always refreshes itself and becomes something. Let's talk about like what they call dance music and the DJ magazine. I used to write for DJ magazine as well. DJ magazine post George Floyd had something where they're giving their race review quarterly, and one of their slogans was that dance music is black music. Because what happened was that we started to separate it. When we talk about black music, dance music, it meant anyone else than Africans, because dance music, the face of dance music were Europeans, particularly when you had electronics come into it and you don't have to sing and you can use these machines to create music. So it's called dance music or electronic dance music. So DJ Magazine, as part of their, I don't know, remix post George Floyd, was making the point that, hey guys, the root of dance music is black music and dance music is black music. I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyway, yeah, so anyway, things happen. Yeah, the point I wanted to make is that sometimes the music happens, but I don't realize that it's black music because the face you're seeing are Europeans. So it needs DJ magazines for me to say, actually, what you listen to is black music. Let's talk about rave. When rave came as well, and I'm talking about acid. So this was the 80s. I get my decades mixed, or is it the 90s? I forgot anyway. The second decade of what was it called? Love. A lot of the guys were Europeans. They're using their computers, Atari or whatever, to make the music. So you call it white music or pop music. But it's for people like us to let people know that no, it's also black music. So sometimes black music is happening, but we don't recognize it. Let me go back a bit, because being the historian, I have to throw these things in. Adele, Amy Winehouse. I'm not quite sure what year, but there was a year in which BBC's got something. I think it's a Sounds, in which they introduced the people who are going to be the stars of the future. And I think in that vein, there were 3 European singers, Adele, Amy Winehouse, and another girl. And at that time, they're described as doing soul music. And soul music is African music or black music. But when you listen to Adele, Adele's not going to be described as soul music today. So it's described as pop. And know what that does? When a magazine like Music Week does the charts, and an organization like BPI, British Phonographic Industry, does the charts, and they're looking at the data, they'll say pop music is this percentage, and black music or R&B is this percentage. But some of what they classify as pop music is actually black music, and it should be part of the R&B or whatever. So we end up having a lower market share than what is the reality. So language and the definition, the perception is an issue. Rock music, for example, is black music. But how often do you see African musicians described as rock musicians? How often? But
can you say more about that, about rock music being
Right.
African music?
Right. Who are the progenitors of rock music? If not Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Rolling Stones, to their credit people like Chuck Berry, what's his name, Willie Dixon, Chicago Blues. I'll tell you something, Rolling Stones one time, and I better get that quote, said, we're not a pop band, or a pop, we're not a pop band, we're an R&B band. In the 60s, The Who, all these guys that we call rock bands, they were proud to describe themselves as R&B groups. When most of them started, including Rolling Stones, they were not writing their songs. They were covering blues records, they were covering rock records, they were covering Chuck Berry, the Beatles. I've got one of their albums. I think the first 2 albums, it's got Chuck Berry, it's got Willie Dixon and stuff in there. Black music. So I'm glad you've asked me the question, but there's no denying. Even the European face acknowledged that it is black music. What's his name? Keith Richards, who's the guitarist of the Rolling Stones, saying all my licks, I copied them from Chuck Berry. But he's gone on to make the multi-millions. I did a program that's online. So if you Google British black music, Kwaku, I think copyright or culture, that'll come up. So that's a useful one. I'm sure Ambrose, you better check it out, because then you get all that information in terms of rock and how they've made money out of it, and the Africans are struggling and blah, 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 blah. So anyway, in a nutshell, yes, rock music is, there's no doubt that it is black music. The only confusion is that the face of it, the people who sell a lot of it are European. So it's no doubt that people think it's quote unquote white music. Yeah.
Thank you, Kwaku. Thank you. So this is the last chance to anyone who is in the audience who would like to ask a question.
Should I just jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm always looking to learn, and I've already learned in this seminar that black music goes underground, which is something that I'll research later. So I'm listening with a listening ear.
Okay, no, that's fantastic. I know Ambrose is reading the charts, but I think someone, is it a Karen or someone said they're here to learn, so they really pretty much sort of echoing what Ron just said, but someone is put on their video, so maybe they want, Karen, do you want to unmute and maybe make a comment or contribution? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just come because I'm in the US, and as I tell people in the US that you know, we don't learn, like CU teach a lot of Black history and stuff. The US don't teach you that. You know, you have to go out. I tell you, you need to step outside to learn. I go out to other countries and I join webinars. I join Jewish webinars. I join Asian, you know, and stuff, because I'm learning. Then you could see comparison, because, you know, we don't learn stuff like that. Or we learn a certain little bit of stuff and that's it. Like, I learn a lot with y'all. Like, I don't, you know, things like that, you know, so.
No, thank you very much. And
yes,
no, you're welcome. Thank you, Sister Karen. And obviously, the online space is giving an opportunity to be global. So we do have, maybe we don't have a lot of numbers, but we do have people from different parts of the world and not necessarily from the UK. I have to say, when we did our Brent Black Music History project, and somebody, let me look here to see what year, because I don't remember, quite frankly. 2007. Wow, how many years? Ronnie, you do economics, so you can calculate and tell me how many years ago, 2007. And there was a guy in America who ordered so many of these things to make sure that his people, because I'll tell you an anecdote. So to So blew up in the 90s, I do believe, again, as I say, I'm terrible with my decades. Whenever they blew up, I think the 90s, I do believe. When they went to America, and you remember, So got the keys to at least 2 US cities. They won Grammys, so they're a big band in their day. A lot of African Americans do not know that there were Africans in the UK, let alone that we had people doing Black music in the UK. So that's the level of ignorance within certain sectors. I'm not going to tie the whole African American population, but I'm saying some only know about African American history, and that is it. They don't know anything outside the world. And that actually speaks to America. People that are just going to listen to, I don't know, Fox or whatever, are not going to know, oh, there's a TikTok in which people are asked to maybe name an African country. They can't even name an African country. They can't even name an African country. So in the level of ignorance. But look, you know something, I'm not here to decry people. I'm here to respect people who make an effort, like Sister Karen, who you got a lot of music, your own music in America, but you step out of that to find what's happened elsewhere, which is very important. So thanks a lot for that contribution. Yeah,
can you
go ahead.
Me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, sure. So this was educational for me, and so to echo the comments of the previous person, Karen, I think you said was the name you called. It's for me, it's an education, a broad education. I love my Caribbean music. I love African music. But as she has mentioned, I also listen to other music as well too. And where there's an opportunity to learn and expand my understanding and knowledge of music in the world, I take advantage of that. So this was very broadening for me, and that was what I came here for. And every time I listen to something that you guys put on, Kwaku and Ambrose, I always learn on it.
Oh,
so well done.
No, thank you for that. So where are you calling from?
I'm in Maryland.
Well, there you go. Another across the Great Sea, the Atlantic.
Yeah, I'm from Trinidad, but I'm living in the States. Yeah.
Okay. No, fantastic. So Trinidad, I've been doing a lot of Windrush stuff, and people are just celebrating, which is good, but some of the history is questionable. So I stick to the history that is robust, that can be interrogated based on facts of contemporary information, not our recent knowledge. So I mentioned Trinidad in the sense of a plaque being given to, what's his name? Lord Kitchener. Lord Kitchener was on the Windrush, the ship. So a plaque was unveiled a few weeks ago in Manchester where he ended up. So big up.
I know Lord Kitchener good. My
Right.
family's from the Virgin Islands and Trinidad, St. Kitts, Nevis, all of those islands. My father had 13 brothers and sisters, so they was in the Navy. So I know Lord Kitchener really good.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
no, I come, just like I said, I come to learn about the true history, because now I'm seeing a lot of things on this American TV, and then they say later, oh, we made a mistake. You know, you see how they, like now, in the background, I have the pyramids, you know what I'm saying? I'm looking at that. So now they seen this thing they was trying, I forgot the black, one of the kings, you know, they was trying, you know how they be trying to cover up the Kush and all that. So I look at that. That's all I look at TV. I don't look at it right live and all. I look at educational. I like to learn stuff. You know what I'm saying? I know when I come over to y'all tell the truth, and I write down, look at my brother Andrew. I started like, you know, brother Andrew.
Absolutely. Yeah, great brother.
Every Tuesday, Hidden Truth. I'm on there. So.
Indeed. So
yeah, and I write this stuff down. I write it down. I go, you know, I dig it up and I look. You know, everything when he say names and thing, when they say the name, you know, just like they tell you in church, the same stuff. You know, oh, don't believe with the Bible. Yeah, go look it up for yourself. You know what I'm saying? So.
Okay,
you know,
thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
No,
very educational.
Hi.
Where are you calling from?
Pueblo, Colorado in the United States.
Wow. Okay. Ooh. So the Americans seem to outnumber the UK people, right? So what brought you to this program, and what did you pick up from today?
I'm actually a graduate student looking, I'm doing a research project on African Americans. So it brought me to, I actually had to do a lot of research to find this, and so be able to be educated on all these issues that were so important, and also the music and the history behind the music was really fascinating. So it gave me a lot of information. So I really appreciate that.
No, that's cool. Let me just tell you something. I don't know how far back you go, but I'm doing a program. So maybe I should plug my where I put my events on, because I know Karen knows, but not all of you. I put my events on African History Plus, that's PLUS, AfricanHistoryPlus.eventbrite.com. Some of you may have booked through that. And one of our programs will be in September, looking at Samuel Coleridge Taylor, 111 years since his death. Now, Samuel Coleridge Taylor, and Ambrose, I talked about rock being black music, and you said you wanted some more information. I posit that any musical expression of Africans is black music. So let me talk about Coleridge Taylor. He was into the classical music. You see what language sometimes can be twisted that we understand it in a particular way. Classical music does not necessarily mean Western classical music. It's just that we're in the West. So when people talk about classical music, they default to Western classical music. But there's African classical music, and I dare say Asian classical music. How many people know that? When we say classical music, we default to Western classical music. So let me come to Western classical music. Samuel Coleridge Taylor was one of the great composers within that milieu, within that genre. But you know what he did? His mother was European, but his father was African from Sierra Leone. Sadly, he didn't meet his father, he didn't see his father. His father went back to Sierra Leone after graduating as a doctor, qualifying as a doctor, medical doctor. So although he did not have an African in his upbringing, he related to Africa. He was at the first Pan-African conference, not Congress, conference, that was 1900 in London, and produced some of the music there. He worked with people like Paul Dunbar, who was an African-American poet. to put some of his words to his music. High Water Wedding Feast. It's one of the greatest classical compositions ever. It was a suite of 3 cantatas that came together in 1900 at the Royal Albert Hall. For those that know London, Royal Albert Hall is one of the most prestigious venues in London. Yeah. He went to America 3 times. In 1904, he was invited to the White House, and Carrie, or Carlos, I don't know, I think it was Carrie that spoke last. He did not go through the back door. That's where African Americans used to go through as cooks or whatever. He went through the front door as a guest of Theodore Roosevelt. He was the first American to conduct a European-led orchestra, Carrie. That was the status he had. Some people think he was African-American because they don't do their history. He was so big. In those times, you didn't have a superstar. He was like the Beatles of his day. He went to America 3 times. There are choral societies named after him. Google it. Samuel Crute Taylor Choral Societies. It was the Washington Society, DC, Washington DC Society. I believe that invited him maybe to 104. But anyway, so you may want to find out a bit more. I've got, if you Google National Archives, the UK National Archives, I did a program on there. So there's a podcast on there. So that might help. So thanks for Carrie. Nada.
And then maybe so that we bring the event to an end, maybe if we have like final words from you.
Okay.
And then we end on that note.
Kwaku, please. It's Elsina. In the chat, there's Archie's Tenet, and above him you have 90 th. I wonder who's that person, and is that his age?
Archie has got 90th. I'm not quite sure. No, I know Archie. Archie, you got 90th, and Alcina is asking, what's the 90th there? Can you unmute and quickly tell us what that is so we can move on?
Yeah, I believe it's one of the bands. Can you hear me, by the way? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe it's one of the bands you was talking about earlier. I don't know if it was it wasn't Soul to Soul. It was another band you mentioned. And you asked what year was the
So actually saying it was the 90s. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Because I did admit that I get my decades mixed up.
Yeah, it was one of
when I'm doing this, but when I'm writing, I do research and I put it down there. But off cuff, I don't remember so much. Yeah, so
I know Soul to Soul actually was in the background around the late 80s and then blew up in the 90s.
Yeah, no, I think the first album came out, I think 88 or something like that. So
that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. That the first 2 albums were fantastic. Club Classics. You see how confident they were? They named the first album Club Classics Volume 1 because they're expecting other things to come. You know, when you see films and you see part 2, part 3, the first one is not named part 1 because they didn't know how successful it is going to be. But so we're confident they named it Club Classics Volume 1. Ambrose, you said something to wrap up. What did you say to wrap up?
Yeah, maybe final words from you.
Yeah. No, basically, I'm going to say thank you for all those that have been on call, those that have dropped off scenes. But I can assure you that between myself and Ambrose, we're going to reconvene and it's going to be an even greater experience. And those that said they came to learn, I tell you, you'll be able to learn a bit more because some people learn from visuals, not just audio. People learn in different ways. So get what's coming from the DVD in terms of audio and visuals. That will make a better learning experience. It will happen within the next few weeks. So look, Ashay, thank you very much for staying the course. Ambrose, over to you.
I love you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Kwaku, and thank you very much to everyone for attending. Like what Kwaku mentions, what we are going to do is, from now until possibly the end of the year, on to next year as well, we'll be having a regular series of these conversations where we focus on Black music. The reason why CivicLeicester is involved is because, these conversations are important. And there is learning in there, there's value in there, and we need to make that accessible, available to the people. So without more from me, thank you very much. And thank you, Kwaku, and see you all next time.
Can I just say something, Ambrose? You need to plug yourself because the other stuff that you've done on the reggae is online, isn't it? So why don't you tell people that it's online for them to maybe go and check out what you've done in the past?
Yes. So what I might do one better, I might I'll put a link. So with Kwaku and a few other people, we've held a number of events focusing on reggae music. 2 of them are available on YouTube. I'll put the link in the chat for you to listen at your own leisure. And we'll call it The Politics of Reggae. That's the name of the playlist. That's the title of the playlist. And there are going to be, a few more around similar themes. And
Right.
yeah.
I'm just making sure that I can see it. Yeah. So he's put in the chat, but whenever I send something on this program, I'll definitely make sure that I put those links in whatever I'm sending as well to circulate to you guys. Yeah. So as Ambrose said, well, it's been a good evening. I've taken over his job by talking too much, but yeah, Ambrose, thank you very much. And we'll meet by God's grace not too long from now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you and good night.